The Research Left Behind with Professor Ashley.
Hello and welcome to The Research Left Behind, the only Twitch stream, YouTube show, and podcast, depending on your mode of access, which sweeps the cutting room floor to bring you the research that got left behind. My name is Professor Ashley, and yes, I am a real professor who teaches people how to make video games. Tonight, I am joined by Dr. Kishonna Gray, author of many articles on the subject of technology, gaming, race, and gender, but tonight we're only focusing on one. White Streaming, Black Aesthetics is the name of the book chapter. And if you are watching the live stream, you can type !book into chat to get a link to order the book for your library. If you are watching or listening after the fact, please check the episode description for that link. Faculty, staff, students, please join me in saying thank you to Dr. Gray for being on the show and telling us all about the research she had to leave behind in White Streaming, Black Aesthetics.
Yay!
Yay! I can hear you. You're here. Thank you for being here.
I'm excited to be here. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's summer, so, technically we're not supposed to be working, but, I had to explain to people, I'm like, we don't get like summer breaks. Like that's actually when the work begins, the summer's when we catch up on all the things that we left behind.
You did it. You did it. You said the name of the show. I wonder how many times you can do that tonight.
Let's keep track. Let's keep count. Okay. So that's one. All right. I'm working on it.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. To chime in, I was absolutely floored. I talked to former guest of the show, Professor Jose Zagal, earlier today, and he said, "Oh, I thought you'd be like on vacation. You seem like you're doing a lot of work." And I was like, but you live this life. Like, what are you talking about?
Like, why are you acting like we get a break? Like, we don't, academics don't get a break. Like, we're always working. There's always something to do. Yeah, always.
But
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. This is my favorite type of work to do, is to read really cool book chapters and learn really awesome new information. Well, new to me information. So I'm really excited that you're here. And before we get started properly asking questions about White Streaming, Black Aesthetics, we have our segment that we call our Conflict of Interest, or COI segment, which is a total joke because this show is just me and moderator Chris. There is no HR department. There is no ethics board, research ethics board on this program. But everyone should still say hi to Nifty Chris, our Twitch moderator. And we should still disclose how we know each other. So do you remember how we met?
Oh my gosh. So I feel like the first time we met IRL was probably at the Utah Games Symposium.
Yep.
But I feel like we were connected before that. And I'll be honest, I think I didn't realize, when you had a name change, like I didn't know that, it's not like you have to make like a major declaration of like, oh, I've got a name change, so this is me. So it took me a minute to like connect the Ashley with this Ashley. I was like, oh, they're the same. Okay. So, but I feel like the first time that we met IRL, it was at the Utah Games Symposium, but I feel like we met before then. Do you know our origin story? Do we have a deeper origin story than that? I'm sure we met somewhere over a Zoom call, right?
No, I think I was just a fan of yours for a long time. I think I just parasocial followed you from the shadows.
I love it. That's the best, but those are the best connections. And thank you for doing that. Thank you for following me and for being so awesome. You're amazing. I'm so glad to be connected with you.
I am too, and I'm so glad that when I send emails to people, they don't react with a restraining order, which I think they probably could in some capacity. But you are extremely generous with your time, and you're one of the nicest people in the world, and I'm super, super stoked that you're here. And on that note, what are you drinking?
Oh, I am drinking. Listen, I'm always just drinking water. I'm in my water era. I'm in my nature era. So I'm trying to do clean eating, clean drinking, right? But I am trying to, I got some milestones I want to reach, like health milestones. And so I'll probably, it'd be TMI right now. But so I had a diabetes diagnosis. And then one of the things that they offered to prescribed to me was Ozempic. So I tried Ozempic for like a week. It fucked my stomach up. And I was like, damn, I was ready to be skinny. And now I'm mad that I'm not going to be skinny that quick. So, but I shouldn't say, I say that half jokingly because I want to be very sensitive, to what people are experiencing and going through. But I have to cut weight. I had to, manage like my sugars. So I've been trying to eat right and get back into, eating healthy and moving my body and stuff. So I'm just drinking water. I wish I could show you. You probably I don't want to, the videos where people try to show you what's in the cup or the food and then they just knock it all over. So I won't do that. But it's literally just water in my metal cup. That's it.
I did that on stream recently where I did actually spill the water. And then I realized that that's kind of a silly thing to do anyway, because it could be vodka.
Don't spill the vodka.
Yeah.
Don't spill the vodka.
I have fizzy water out of my Utah Renaissance Festival mug that is getting green screened out. So everything's going well.
This is fun. It's all fun.
It is super fine. So
next tip.
Before we get into the questions about the book chapter, I just obviously need to congratulate you. Getting a book chapter published is huge. And I mean, it's really fun to say that because you are someone who's prolifically published many, many core books that I use as textbooks in my classroom. I'm not joking when I say I was a fan of yours before we met. And so a book chapter seems like a very modest piece of research to take from you, but I thought it was super appropriate for the stream, and it's bleeding edge research.
Yeah. Let me speak a little bit to that book chapter though. So I know one of the things that's really interesting to me that a lot of folks always ask is, what counts for what, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the parts of being onboarded, like as a professor, of what weight does this have? How significant is this? Should I do more of this or less of this? I like a different approach to it. So I understand the milestones of our institutions, right? I'm like, okay, your institution wants a book and some articles or just books or whatever it is. But I always found that book chapters gave me the most flexibility to be provocative and to kind of be cutting edge and be innovative and to think differently and have these big ideas, because there is no pressure, to kind of have this kind of uniform way of writing, like in a journal article, or this very specific way of telling a story, like in a book. A book chapter gives me the flexibility to kind of just go wild, with ideas. I'm like, oh, I got this crazy idea, let me just write it out. And then, the book chapter people are like, yeah, we just need chapters in here. So I actually found my, the most energy, the things that kind of carry and sustain my work is from the book chapter. So I have a lot of book chapters. So I'm not against book chapters. And I wish more scholars, especially senior scholars, would, we are the ones that decide what's important and significant. But I think some of my dopest work is actually in book chapters. Yep.
And not to be too mercenary about it, but I found that most of my citations come from book chapters because you get a lot of bang for your buck, right? It's one book and you get a bunch of authors.
You get so much stuff. And what I also love about a book chapter, a volume, edited volume, whatever it is that you get to be in conversation with so many cool folks. There's so much discovery of oh, who is that? Oh, what are they writing about? Who are they? So I really love what a volume, an edited volume, or whatever it is, a handbook, can do. It kind of gives us that free form academic writing. Yeah, that we don't do enough of.
I really appreciate you bringing up the context of how academics quantify their productivity and the fact that we are indeed responsible for our own demise in that capacity.
We could have created anything, but this is what we wanted to do. Okay, go off.
Oh, I'm dying. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. So one of the things I hope to achieve with this stream podcast is to provide some insight and context for grad students who might be curious about things like how we quantify productivity, but also on how to go about co-authoring. I think co-authoring is one of those things, again, where if you have a single authored book or a single authored whatever, sometimes some departments somewhere rank that as higher than co-authored, but some of the most rewarding work that I've done personally is through co-authoring. And so I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about your co-authoring strategy, because the chapter that we're talking about tonight, White Streaming Black Aesthetics, is co-authored with Catherine Coles. And so you could either speak generally or speak specifically about the chapter under discussion.
I want to speak, a bit generally about co-authoring. So I'll go ahead and say I'm a terrible collaborator, right? So let me tell you why I'm a terrible collaborator. I don't care anything about deadlines. I won't respond to emails. Listen, deadlines are suggestions. So like I'm a terrible collaborator like in that way. So a lot of people find it pretty frustrating to like work with me. And I get it. And these are things that I probably won't be changing at any point in my career. So I let people know this up front. I'm like, are these things that your type A personality can handle? If so, then let's build dope shit, right? But if not, that's okay. We'll still be friends. We don't have to do this. But I have found extreme value in co-authoring, and most of the people who I've co-authored with, I think up until this point, I think maybe only recently, is it like other senior scholars, like Tom Apperly, I publish often, with our colleague on the across the pond. But most of my co-authoring is with graduate students, and first off, they need pubs, right? So yes, it's this mentoring, this is great. They just need pubs, right? And so a lot of times they don't know how to do it. So I like working with them and doing also with the co-author pieces that I do. I'm not going to have a grad student do like a 10,000 word article. I'm like, let's just find a good book chapter, knock out 4,000 or 5,000 words, just so I can help you learn the process. Because in addition to just kind of writing words and putting words like on a page or a paper, we got to navigate the administrative processes. We got to navigate like deadlines. We got to navigate revise and resubmit. So there are a lot of things that, students could use like mentors. Hell, we still need mentorship like around those kinds of things, right? So I like to help shepherd students along like through the process to try to like demystify it so it's not so intense and not so extra. So most of my co-author like pieces, like I'm very intentional about like doing it with doing that with graduate students, and it's been very rewarding, and I wish other folks would do that. But period. I wish other folks would do that. But I also hate this pressure that so many graduate students feel to have to like publish and to have this particular kind of profile before they even finish with their PhDs. So I wish we could slow it down too. But until then, we gotta make sure these students get published. Yeah.
Something else that you touched on that I want to follow up on is that no one really teaches us how to mentor. The advice I was given is, well, think of someone that mentored you and then just copy what they did. And then if you're one of the lost children that sometimes happens in grad school, like, well, you didn't really get mentored at all. So
we don't, and that's no shade to like our advisors and our mentors and the folks who are in these have us in these programs, but mentorship is not an easy thing. It's a tough thing, and I think I often, one of the things I find so frustrating is that folks like us often do so much ghost advising and ghost mentorship. You've got your main person, that nice shiny scholar who's amazing, but you don't know how to do a damn thing. And then they're coming to us, they're like, Kishonna, how do I do this? I'm like, where's the handbook? Everything's in the handbook. Let's read the handbook. Okay, things that aren't in the handbook, this is how you ask the questions. This is where you find things out. So there's a lot of discovery and uncovery throughout the entire stage of like graduate school, right? And I feel like that we are, and then by the time folks, get to dissertation phase and are finishing that up, they're so exhausted. They're so exhausted because of all this extra labor, that they're not told that they're going to have to do. And then most of the time they have nothing by the end of it. And so many of them are like, I'm done with academia. And I just feel like there are some people in academia that are okay with that they actually want that. They want to push people out. I'm not okay with that practice. I'm like, if we bring people in, we need to, help support them like to the end and not make it more harmful. Like we're supposed to be helping, not doing more harm. And so I think that's the thing that frustrates me, is that there's so much additional harm that's happening like in academia. And I'll call it out. I'm like, I'll talk shit to all y'all out here, for harming these students. I'll go to Twitter and talk shit, people know I will. So I'm like, don't be harming folks out here, and then we won't have no problems, right? So
that's how I know you're a good person. It's as easy as that. You can judge a professor on how they treat their students, I swear.
The measure of a professor is how they treat their students, and also how their students speak about them. That's one thing that I'm noticing too. There's some, period. We need to put that on a t-shirt, Ashley.
Yeah, new
money.
merch coming soon.
New merch dropping soon. Hit that like button and subscribe for the new merch.
Oh, this is awesome. I can already tell my face is going to hurt by the end of the stream from smiling and laughing, which is such a good thing.
I was like, oh my God. Hey. We up.
So let's talk about the chapter. So I am obviously a huge fan, and the chapter is all of my interests rolled into one. So I'm super, super excited to talk about it. But White Streaming Black Aesthetics, if you are unfamiliar, is a chapter about the white appropriation of Black culture on streaming services like this one, like Twitch. The chapter has some really great quotes from Black streamers that highlight examples of cultural theft. So from white streamers stealing from Black content creators so that the white streamers appear cool. But I was wondering if you can give me another example that's not in the article, since this is the research left behind, that you came across either in your own experience or that you wanted to put in the gosh, I called it an article, sorry, book chapter, that you wanted to put in the book chapter but didn't quite make it in, or maybe even one that you thought was too controversial to put in, or...
Yeah. I appreciate you asking that question. I really love this platform that you have. You know, when we think about what we can't bring with us, like, you know, what doesn't make it to the finish line. And all those things it's not like that they're not great ideas or great concepts or fully fleshed out. Sometimes we just got to cut things, right? Especially in those limited formats like a book chapter. But one of the things that I really wish we could have leaned in more is like the concept of like micro celebrity, and how a lot of these streamers, especially these gaming kinds of streamers, you know, they built their backs off of doing like a lot of harm. They built their backs off of, you know, especially like the scream streamer variety of like where these people are loud and just extra and, you know, trolling and making awful jokes. And that was the thing that became very profitable. And that was like the template to like build these big, vast networks of followers and subscribers and people, you know, who follow you. Like, so the template was like to be provocative, you know, say something kind of offensive, you know. They're also okay with like just, you know, saying inappropriate things and maybe apologizing later or not. But like the path to micro celebrity, like in this streaming space, is really contentious and like really harmful. And then if you notice, like, especially if you follow like streaming communities, a lot of people will do that early stage, really harmful, really toxic kind of content. And then they will age out of that once they've got their platforms where they want, once they can monetize it and, you know, they're making money off of it. And then they'll like switch to be like, oh, we're professional. We don't do that here. You know, we're not doing all those kinds of things. So it's really interesting just to see like those corporate kind of like imperatives that are influencing like this space. That's actually one of the things that I hate about streaming, right?
Yeah.
You know, it was supposed to be this space that was going to be cool, and it was going to transform broadcasting. It was going to transform television. It was going to transform like all these things. But then when you look at it, it's still replicating like the same old practices of regular ass TV. We probably have to cut for commercial right now because of, you know, the corporate like imperatives, like to make money and advertising. And so I think I think that's one of the things that, you know, we couldn't really talk about. Why? Okay, so in the pathway of like figuring out, you're gonna put on this Black culture and put on these Black decors and put on this Black speech and this Black scent, you know, in the process of doing that, I don't really think we had enough time to explain why a lot of folks do that. And that's because those are the provocative things. You know, if you dress up in blackface on Halloween and you say sorry, even though like a lot of these streaming generations, they don't care if it's, you know, what's that one saying, like, any publicity is like good publicity. Yeah. But, you know, just they really believe that even if it's negative attention, they're still getting like hits and likes, and people are coming to like their channels. Is driving up like the analytics. And so we sometimes can't have like a really like nuanced like conversation around like they're doing like a deep dive to like deconstruct the process and the path to becoming, you know, a streaming celebrity, right? And so I think that micro celebrity, the parasocial relationships, you know, a lot of that stuff was the things that had to get cut, because it would have spent too much time focusing on the people who are doing the harm. And I wanted to just say enough to just, but just still bring it back to, you know, how Black folks are feeling, how Black women in particular are feeling about all their content getting stolen. You know, one of the the wildest stories that I had was somebody, there was a streamer, they had like a little small variety niche stream, just like a few of their friends, probably probably not even more than a couple dozen folks that would come to their stream. But they said it was like clockwork. Every evening they'll do their stream, and then that next morning, they see elements of their content like stolen and thefted and like put into like these other kind of like channels. And then these folks, because they have like the larger platform, they're like, I can't even go file a report. I can't like submit like a case for plagiarism, that was also, shut me up anytime, because I'll just keep talking and talking and talking, but just cut me off anytime. But I actually found that really interesting that a lot of Black women have very beautiful, interesting citational practices, like when it comes to like their content and streaming. They're like, oh, I borrowed this from so and so, I'm gonna riff this from so and so. Like they have a beautiful ethic and a beautiful culture of care, like around their citational politics. And I think a lot of them, they were like, I wouldn't even be mad at them like adopting like these Black aesthetics if they would just cite their work, cite where they got it from, just reference where you got these things from. Yeah.
You used a term that I'm unfamiliar with, so I just want to circle back for a second, which is micro celebrity. So is that defined in a quantifiable way? Like if you have this many followers?
Yeah. Actually, I think somebody wrote about it here. Let me just see if I can find it real quick. Micro celebrity. Who wrote about that? There, Alice Marwick. Alice Marwick, wrote about like micro celebrity, like on YouTube. And I'm not sure what the, some other folks did, but I think the earliest that I saw that framework was scholar Alice Marwick. You may know me from YouTube, micro celebrity in social media. So there might be like a quantified way, but I think that number changes. I think back in the day it was like a smaller number. I think micro celebrity now, like I still think you might have to have like a few thousand like active, consistent people who are like tuning in and watching. But for me, even like a couple thousand is still huge in my mind. So whenever I think about like micro celebrity, I'm like, so it's kind of like this concept of like Black famous. Like, are you Black famous? Like only like Black folks know you. So the way that Black folks like describe like celebrity is like if there's a group of people that like know you for something, then that it's not linked to like a number. It's not like if you have this many kinds of things. And I really like the way that like Black folks like describe like celebrity, because it's not in analytical kind of ways. Like it's not in like reducing people's experiences to like numbers. It's like, what have you contributed to the culture, right? Did you contribute like a dance? Are we doing like your dance on TikTok? Are we wearing your clothing? Are we trying to look like you? So I think that your contribution to like Black culture is like the measure of celebrity, like for Black folks. I probably need to write that down, because I probably need to write that out. I don't know if anybody's ever like really like talked about like what it means to be like Black famous. I feel like I heard like a comedian talk about that like the other day, like Gary Owens or somebody. He said, I think he has like a stand-up saying he's like Black famous. But I don't really think that we have much scholarship on what that actually means. So thank you for asking that question.
Oh, thank you for the answer. That's every time I read your writing, I learn something totally new, but not just like a factoid, but an entirely different way to view a social phenomenon. And I literally just happened again. So I love it. It's so cool.
I love it. I love it too. Yay.
I wondered if you had similar experiences that you could talk about, wherein I'm most familiar with your work on gaming, particularly in like first-person shooter gaming. So I wonder if you've experienced this phenomenon there, where white players are adopting cultural practices of either Black content creators or Black players for coolness or credibility or...
Yes. So I'm so glad you asked that question. One of the most interesting phenomenons in gaming that happened, it was early in the day. Mixer was still around, Kick wasn't here, Twitch was competing, with Mixer, and a lot of people just find that that's just wild. Like, what, Mixer was a thing? I'm like, yes, Mixer was her. Mixer was that girl, right? But I think that what was interesting, like during that era, was you remember the era of Xbox Record That? And so Xbox Record That was basically, voice recognition technologies that were inside the game, and you can kind of talk Cortana. We know it now as Cortana, right? But it was like this early test runs of like voice recognition technology, like inside gaming. And one of the interesting things that came out of that was this phenomenon of Xbox Record That. So let's say we're playing a game, I do something really awesome like inside that game, and then I will use the phrase Xbox Record That, and then it would record, and then it would store, in the cloud, and I could go and get that content, and I could, make little mini videos, and then I would upload the videos to like YouTube. That was usually like the pathway, right? But what was so interesting like about this phenomenon of like Xbox Record That is that um people start using it as like a catchphrase even away from Xbox. So they would be like on the court and do something like a cool alley oop and like dunk it, and then like these black dudes would be like, "Man, Xbox Record That." So it's like it became this really popular like phrase, and it was so short lived, but it was such an iconic like moment that I think that I probably should revisit it. But I would say that that's the thing that kind of took like a life form on its own. Now I wouldn't say that there was like theft in other ways, but the way that black folks used that phrase and incorporated that phrase in like their IRL life, I think it was like pretty significant. Some of the other, of course, the NBA 2K culture. There's so much appropriation, so much theft of black culture and black expression inside 2K. Drip, swag, skins, clothes, like the movements, like every like there are some generate like some of this younger generation, they're like walking, they're just like a walking avatar, of like they have how can I say this? I don't want to be insensitive to like identity formation, identity development, but a lot of these young folks use games like NBA 2K to kind of develop like a persona and to develop an identity, and then they actually like bring that identity into like the real world spaces, right? So when I'm thinking about like this era of like brain rot, like of just these random internet words, these random gaming words, these random like phrases that people, young folks will bring into like school, into different kind of spaces. That's like a direct result of like the power of streaming cultures and the power of like gaming cultures that I don't think we really like talk about a lot. But inside that is also, especially in the 2K space, the core of what folks are bringing in and bringing into their actual lives is black culture. How they dress, dance, move, speech, hair, all that customization, and that's a direct reflection of like the contributions of black culture, right? We don't acknowledge that enough either. Yeah,
very true. Very true. Thank you for those examples. This is such a great conversation. We're on question 2 and we're halfway through.
I'm like, we're not going to get through all these questions.
No.
I feel bad that you've expended so much labor to do all those questions. I'm like, we'll get through a few, but that's about it.
It's you know what? It is what it is. That's just how, that's right. We might have to leave behind research and the research lab. I'm sorry.
Is that the second one? No,
that's the second one.
Good.
We're keeping track. We're keeping track. So let's talk about, I think earlier, either before the stream or earlier in the stream, we talked about the carceral state. And you talk about how Black women are surveilled and penalized both in everyday life, right, in the real world outside. Yeah. And I think in the news, this is very present because we're seeing really scary things in the news about facial recognition technology in the protests that are happening in Los Angeles right now. But then you talk about how Twitch functions in a similar way, or I guess, we could extend this to any kind of video-based media. I'm sure that this would hold true with TikTok or anything else. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So I wondered if you could give some examples of how technology serves to surveil Black women.
Oh, yes. So during the first Trump administration, there was this concept called getting zucked. Do you remember getting zucked? So on Facebook, if folks spoke up and out about certain things, some maybe offensive things that, president was saying, or, folks who adopted like Trumpism, like in that way. And if folks were vocal on social media, like in saying that, there were some interesting things happening, right? So let's say, and this was directly tied to the movement for Black Lives and directly linked to hashtag say her name, right? And so a lot of Black women were like advocating, saying, hey, we need more visibility for this. People need to pay attention to this. There are contradictions here. And they were getting zucked. So to get zucked means that you are either banned, you have a communication ban, or you have a shadow ban, or you have like a time ban, or there are some restrictions that some things that restrict your movement inside Facebook, right? And Twitter, now X, did the similar things, and so a lot of people say, we got musked. Thinking about, the guardian of the space formerly known as Twitter now, right? And so there are all these practices that people can't seem to explain. They're like, that person said and did those things, and they're still active, but I said and did similar things, but I am banned. What's the difference here? And so a lot of folks recognize that these things were gendered and they were racialized, and that there seemed to be extra punitive measures taken against Black women for saying and advocating and saying, certain things, like in particular, right? And so I think when we think about like a carceral state, a lot of people just think about like a prison, like, oh, that's a jail for those evildoers and those criminals and those people who are over there. But I don't think that we recognize how these carceral practices are like embedded in the everyday practices of what we do, especially on these digital media platforms, right? And I think we that was then. So we quickly found that out, right? Especially with the changing of guardianship, like on the space that's formerly known as Twitter. And we see like these punitive practices that are restricting our movement and restricting our speech and restricting all these things. And that's happening now. But Black women were trying to highlight these things more than a decade ago. And like nobody was listening and like paying attention, because it was only impacting a particular segment of the population that everybody was okay with being harmed.
Right.
We were okay with Black women being shushed and deleted and omitted and disappeared. And, we're okay like with these things happening to like Black and Indigenous and, Latinx. Like we're okay with that. And then we were trying to let y'all know, like, hey, y'all need to pay attention to this, because they are basically practicing on us. We're like the testing grounds, or like the proving grounds, like to try these things out, and also so that these platforms can see what can we actually get away with, right? So during the fake news era, misinformation era, a lot of these platforms got away with a whole lot. And anytime like Black women wanted to like express those kinds of things, we were swiftly met with punishments, right? So prison is not a thing. This Ruth Gilmore quote, that's one of my favorite quotes, that prison is not a thing over there, but it's actually something that permeates like everyday aspects like of our lives. And the looming thing is prison, right? But they practice carcerality in like different kinds of ways, like just to kind of, surveillance, surveillance around like, facial recognition technology, voice recognition technology, all these kinds of things there are carceral aspects of carceral aspects are embedded in the everydayness of that I think Black women, Indigenous women, are trying to get folks to like pay attention to before it's too late. Shit, I'm saying that like it's like too late now, right? I mean, because the thing that we said was gonna happen like is happening. So yeah, I'll just period. Yeah.
To steal my moderator's catchphrase, I hate it here.
It's not great. I want off. I want off this ride, okay? Can y'all just let me off?
Yeah.
It's trash. It's trash.
On that note, I mean, I have to ask this, because you're still on Twitter. And I think it's a statement, right, to not leave Twitter, because you're not going to be pushed off a platform. I mean, I'm not trying to I'll let you. I have questions. You still being on Twitter, I think is what I'm trying to say. So
Yeah.
tell me about why you're still on Twitter.
Yeah. I think, some people have these really grand statements about why they're leaving, why they're staying. But for me, it's simple. Um, when I think about the future humans that try to come back and try to tell the story of us, like in this moment now, I want to make sure that they have more than a singular narrative and a singular story, right? So whenever I go any day you go on Twitter, it's just a hot mess of stuff, right? And for me, I also want them to know that in these moments of so much awfulness, so much harm, so much hate, so much scariness, that we also found moments of joy and we found pockets to have joy in. And so if somebody were to go like look at my Twitter feed, like I'm not doom scrolling and sharing the doom scrolling with everybody else. I'm laughing. I'm making jokes. I want to be like a breath of fresh air for people who might be looking for it. But also, if any of this stuff gets left for the future humans who like discover it, I want them to say, yeah, there were some folks like who weren't afraid and like who weren't scared and who you didn't feel like that they were being like pushed to the edges and who didn't just want to isolate and like hide away. I think that a lot of we also think that there's just one way to like resist and one way to do a revolution and one way to do those things, but we have to remember like everybody wasn't fighting on the front lines. I remember having this conversation like with a colleague, just the other day. He was like, there's a reason that Harriet Tubman had a gun, right? I was like, yeah, that's true. I was like, but there's also a reason that Mary cooked. And he was like, who's Mary? I'm like, exactly. Who the fuck is Mary? There was somebody that was cooking, there was somebody that was caring for children. There was somebody that was, providing things. There were people who were doing all kinds of things. Like we are not all on the front lines, bearing arms, right? Like to protect ourselves. There are some people that are doing like other kinds of work. So I guess I just want to show folks that there's a range of ways to exist and to be in these moments. And also, if he want me gone, he can just evict me because I'm not going nowhere. I'm waiting for the eviction. Like that's a platform that we built. Like let me just go ahead and kind of just keep it real funky for a minute. That's a platform that was made. Black folks built Twitter. Nobody can tell me that we didn't. We gave it relevance. We gave it coolness. We gave it dopeness. We gave it its best moments. And I be damned if we're going to just abandon the ship just because we mad about who the guardian of the space is now. Like that just sounds like simple to me. And also Blue Sky is whack as fuck, I heard. So I'm not going to that shit. So I'm just like, I'm going to be sitting here like with the last few folks like who are here like with me on Twitter. Probably me and Andre Brock will probably be the last people on Twitter. We're gonna be the last ones, right? So yeah, I'm not leaving. They can kick me out if they want, but I'm not leaving.
I love it. I love it so much. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you're staying. Yeah. So I'm going to shift gears slightly from the Twitter talk.
I'm going to get fired, Ashley. I'm probably going to get fired after this.
No, we're going to get shadow banned so no one will see it. So you're fine.
Oh, easy peasy.
Yeah, don't worry about it. For you to get fired, people actually have to see this. And we know statistically that's not likely.
At all.
For all the reasons you just listed.
That's right. That's not going to happen. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. There's some freedom in being a micro nano stream.
That's podcast. Right. That's true. That's true. That's true.
My favorite quote, I always like to read out a quote from the book that we're talking about, and my favorite is just really beautifully written and worded, so thank you for that. But I'm going to read out the quote, and then I'm going to ask you to say more about this particular quote. It reads, "A core feature of the hegemonic ideology that permeates digital spaces is that the assumed user was constructed as a white, Western, cishet man. So the presence of Black women in particular disrupts the assumptions and often leads to racism, sexism, and other forms of racialized and gendered oppression." And the reason I like that quote is because it so succinctly summarizes the hostility that I think is very palpable for non-cishet white men when you enter a virtual space. So walk me through it. Tell me a little bit more.
Oh, okay. So I remember back in the day, whenever I was starting to do gaming for dissertation work, and I remember someone said, "Oh, black people play video games," and I was like, "What?" Like my brain didn't even compute those words,
What are we
right?
doing?
And I was like, I'm just like, yeah. And they're like, "Oh, women play video game." Yeah, I'm like, where have you been? And I asked them that question in all sincerity. I'm like, who plays games in your mind or in your world? And they said, well, people that look like me. And it was, cishet white dude. I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, did you ever stop to think that, other people would want to play or could play or should play? Or is this like a space that you curated and crafted, for yourself and other people that look like you? And, he was kind of stumped by the question, right? So I think that was like the nicest way I could have said, like, the world doesn't revolve around you, bruh. Chill out. It was the nicest way that I could say it. But I think that they were a bit stumped, because in the way that he has constructed his world, it's very much like people that look like him, like by him for him, right? And there wasn't any malintention in what that young man said to me. Like, he didn't say it with any malice in his heart. He didn't say it, to be like, oh, what are y'all doing here? He was like, wait, do y'all really play video games? I was actually sad, for him, that there's this entire world and there are all these things that we can do in this world, and you want to hoard it, for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I was very sad. And in that moment, I was like, well, actually, I did the well, actually thing. Women and girls play, and a lot of people of color play. And in fact, they play at these significant rates. And in fact, Black and Latinx folks, play console games, at higher rates. Might be some class reasons here. So there's some intersectional things happening. I had to throw an intersectionality in there, right? But his mind was like blown. And I think in that moment, he felt it started really sweet, and then it kind of got not so sweet, because then he made a comment. He said, I wish I could remember how he said it, but basically what he basically said, we can't have anything, can we? That's basically what he said. I'm like, what do you mean you can't have anything? I'm like, the world is yours, sir. It's all yours. I'm like, and in fact, me playing the game is not taking away anything from you. Because I'm over here playing and you're over there playing, and I'm not disrupting you at all, right? I was like, so why does the discovery of me being in the space and people who look like me being in the space, why does that have to impact you at all? And he couldn't really answer that question for me. He couldn't answer why he was just so bothered with the presence of women and people of color. And I think in that moment, of course, I went down like a deep dive to try to understand, how is it that this group of people, these, white cishet dudes in particular, why they feel so entitled to like spaces, and why they want to exclude everybody else from those spaces. And that took me down some interesting reading. At the time, I didn't really know what to do with a lot of it, right? There was an article that I had wrote, or it was a chapter, I think it was a book chapter that I had wrote that said, dude, I'm not racist, right? There's another article I wrote, a streaming article, they're just too urban, so it's like all this coded language to make you feel better about yourself. It's like, these racial codes and these racial scripts of like, well, I'm going to say these things, I don't want to sound offensive, but I actually am in my core. Like I'm pretty fucking racist, but but I'm going to say and do these things so I don't sound, too bad. But those days are actually over, so people are emboldened and they're empowered, to just say these, overtly, sexist and racist and homophobic and transphobic things. things. And there was like a return to that, right? There was a return to that, like in the first, Trump administration, and of course there's just this return to even more, like heightened return of these ways of like engaging and speaking. Um, and I think that they know that the jig is up, right? So I think that it's like one of those last stands of like, hey, let's try to take our country back. We've got to make it great again. We have to make it better, for us and like and our people. And I really just get sad. I don't get angry. I don't get mad. I don't get upset. I grew up in the town where I grew up in. There is an active Klan chapter, in my county. The Knights of something. It's in Hopkins County, Kentucky. It's in Dawson Springs, Kentucky. And so I grew up with folks like who kind of like thought in these ways and in real life, not online, not on the internet. So I have always, in our town, folks in my town, we've always worked together to try to make it better. All of us coming together. It's not just, there are white folks that were like, hey, we want to get our white folks better. We're trying, be patient with us. We're trying to get our folks in, and we want to make sure you all aren't harmed, and we want to make sure that we kind of come together and do this community thing. And so I never give up hope, because I saw like actual change of like people transforming their thinking and their thoughts around that, and kind of like engaging like the white masculine anxieties of like, oh, if I'm treated in a way that black people are treated, I will never survive, because black people are actually treated kind of awful, and we actually don't want that. That's the thing that they don't want to say, which is why they're holding on, like, by threads. They're holding on to this I don't know, this entitlement. I don't even know how to say it sometimes, but I forgot your question. I don't even know where I'm going with that, but so let me stop right there, because I know we're running out of time too, but I felt the need to have to like say all that. I don't even know.
No, it was so beautiful. I was totally transfixed. Well, first, sorry that you had to go through that and experience that, and thank you for genuinely trying to educate people. I mean, that's a lot of labor, though. That's a lot of emotional labor. That's a lot of sometimes scary physical labor, and also
absolutely
mental, of course, mental labor. Yeah.
That's right. I think it was one of the reasons that I had to leave my first job, at Eastern Kentucky University, because it was around the time of like the first whenever I was leaving, it was the rise of the Trump's first administration, and there was a lot of intimidating things. Students would tell me that they had guns in the car, and I better watch out. And I think even the space that my classroom was in was like riddled with all these like flyers of hate speech flyers and stuff, and there was like no protection. Like the institution just really didn't like protect us. And I realized, I was like, well, if you're not gonna protect me, I gotta go. I'm like, peace, because I ain't fucking around, because I know what the worst could be. Like if there's a person that's motivated to do harm, we know exactly what they're capable of. So I just hope it doesn't ever reach that point.
That actually made me tear up a little bit. I'm really, really sorry that you had to go through that. That is totally inexcusable. I'm sorry that the institution failed to protect you. I'm sorry that people are terrible, and I'm really glad you made a choice to keep yourself safe.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. We're going to fast forward, because in the last 10 minutes-ish, I want to cover 2 more questions. Obviously, we're going to talk about what's the research left behind, but before we get there, I want to ask about what I think, in my opinion, is the greatest contribution to the paradigm shifting contribution of the book chapter for me. So chat, if you have questions for Dr. Gray, please put them in the chat box, and then our mod will hold those, and we can take some questions from the audience at the end. But let me ask this question. So greatest contribution of the chapter, in my opinion, is in positioning what we know about online identities. So coming from a sociological background and learning about Mead and learning about Goffman, right, there's, at least in my education, there was a lot of emphasis on you have multiple identities. The identity of who you are in real life is not necessarily the identity online. In fact, the assumption is it's not your identity online. And you talk about how Black women and Black cyberfeminism counters this a bit, right? And Black women create their own language and modes of expression, and carry those from real life into the virtual. And this was a paradigm shift for me of considering, well, what if people are there, or at least some part of their authentic selves online? What does that mean? And also, what does that mean for thinking about online spaces as being Black spaces or feminine spaces or Black feminine spaces?
Yeah. I think one of the things that this is like one of the contributions of like, this concept of like Black cyberfeminism that I've been trying to do something with, for more than a decade now. It's like one of those like little projects. I remember being in grad school and just thinking about like, how Black women in particular are like, you are on the internet and using blogs and like doing this work. Catherine Knight Steele, also, and other folks, Raven Morale Lloyd and, Ashley Greenway, so there are all kinds of like, this digital era of like Black feminist thinkers that are kind of thinking about what's so distinct about the internet, the tools, and what are we doing differently, but how similar does it look to like historically, historical engagements, like with different kinds of platforms like IRL, right? And I often found that one of the most interesting things that digital technologies and gaming, I think that afford for Black women in particular, is spaces to protect joy. So I really think that joy work is like the thing that makes it like so distinct. And I think that that's what I'm trying to do like in this next book project that I don't think I was supposed to plug that yet, but I'll go ahead. But I think that's like the thing that makes it so distinct and unique. And which is why Black women like protect it with all their might, right? They protect their identity formation, and they recognize that like, yes, my identity is formed based off of my experiences in the world, my family, history, culture, environment, like all those things, yes, influence my identity, but there's also some aspects of like, whenever I go online and how this is also influencing like who I am, and it's giving me empowerment. It makes me feel like I'm empowered, that I can actually create my own narrative. I can do the thing that Black feminist thought taught me to do, right? I can do the thing that like Bell Hooks, Patricia Hill Collins, Octavia Butler, like I can do all these things that they imagined, and these speculative futures are like our presence, and we can actually create the worlds that we want to be in. And I think that that's dope. And one of the things that's like really like significant is, so I'm trying to use like this framework of like Black cyberfeminism to like think in different ways. The person that's like the epitome of like Black cyberfeminism to me right now, Megan Thee Stallion.
Oh yes,
I
yes.
just love everything that human is like doing. And it's because of like all the harm that she experiences. But every day she chooses joy. Lizzo's another one of those people. Every day of the things that people say to her, like in her body, and that she finds ways to kind of just show up and dance and smile and like choose joy. I think that that's like one of like the dopest things, and I feel like I want to do it justice, and I want to do them justice. I've kind of just been slow with it, but also I don't feel, I'm thankful I don't have to like rush to get stuff out there. I don't have like traditional milestones to have to reach, so I'm letting it marinate and like really think through like what actually is this, and what are Black women's contributions to the thing. Yeah.
That's amazing. And the chapter does, in fact, end on a high note, which I love because I think it matches you as a person, talking about how despite everything that the chapter mentions, right, everything that we talked about here, despite how hostile and horrible and carceral and punitive these spaces are, there's a resilience and a hope and a joy on the part of Black women to not allow these spaces, to not allow themselves to be restricted from these spaces. And that's
right.
Beautiful.
That's right. Absolutely. Period.
Okay, so the last question from me anyway, and we have a couple of questions in chat, is to tell me about the research that got left behind in white streaming Black aesthetics. What did you have to cut out for length? What research rabbit holes did you go down that didn't make it in?
So one of the biggest contributions I feel like was Dr. Catherine Coles, my co-author. She sent me down this homesteading rabbit hole.
Oh no!
I'm like, what? That's actually the thing that prompted, us like working like together, right? She was doing like her dissertation work, and she was letting me know about like all this, this white women's soft era and this homestead era, their obsession with like Meghan Markle and the denial of like Meghan Markle's blackness, and then how like they like the pick-me's, and they actually wanted to be the pick-me, and then they're like, so I was like, what? I was like, so it was like a whole world like on TikTok, and like, these like soft era, demure era, homesteader, traditional white trad wife, like these, I'm like, this is wild as hell. And one of her most significant contributions in her beautiful dissertation work was basically saying that, white women are able to have like these lives basically because there are women of color who are upholding the structure. And I was like, damn, I was like, what? And that like just blew my mind, it like, because I know that that's true, but whenever like she like broke down like those kinds of things and like looked at it like historically and brought in like all those stories and like narratives, I'm just always so excited like whenever I can learn, from people and like their work, and like bring in the different aspects of like their own work. And I was like, well, a similar thing is happening like in streaming, of like basically, the most popular like white, streamers basically have built their platforms off the backs of black women who they have stolen and thefted from. So essentially it's the same kind of structure. Black woman, you're here, I'm going to step over you, and I'm going to go to the top, and I'm not going to acknowledge any of the labor that you are expending down here at the bottom. So there are so many kinds of like, interesting, I kind of through threads like through both of our work, but a lot of that, we couldn't put in here because, we were limited like on time and energy, space. And so those are some of the things that we had to like leave behind, in threading the weaves together. Yeah.
Wonderful. We had one question from chat, which is great because we have like a couple minutes. So I think it's important, like your chapter does, to end on a positive note, and also to end on a note that's, the call to action. What can we do? So chat asked, how do we properly give credit online?
Ooh, I love that. So academic citational practices are very specific, right? So we might do like, in text, citations, or in notes, footnotes, like reference pages were cited or whatever. But to do that like online, do you all remember like the era of like that HT, like hat tip, whatever, to somebody? So somebody was saying that H, do you know what I'm saying, Ashley? Am I talking crazy? H/T, like when you tip your hat. So basically there are some things that you can code for, like, I got this from somebody else. So that H/T is an option to do that. But also you can just, so if there's a stream, you can just mention it. You can just say it. Like it's not actually like that hard to just like mention, oh, we got this from so-and-so. We got this from so-and-so, because black women do that all the time. They're not, just like thefting and not saying like where they got things from, right? But there's also like caption space, comment spaces, like there are all kinds of ways that like you could acknowledge that. So I feel like that, the internet cultures can take a few lessons from academic cultures like in this way, because we are pretty solid with our citational practices. Like we don't fuck around about that plagiarism stuff, right? And so I think that a lot of folks could really like acknowledge like a lot of this stuff. Also, somebody was saying that like hashtag culture is a citational practice. Like I am in conversation with other people, and I'm going to use this hashtag to be in conversation with, so there are some like internet digital tools that would allow you to stay in conversation with somebody and to like acknowledge and like reference, where you got things from. And I think that, we haven't really explored like all the range of things, but there are practices that will let you do that. But also just say where the fuck you got the shit from. Period.
That's wonderful.
Great
Thank
question.
you so much for giving us such clear instructions. It's wonderful. We are at the 1 hour mark. So sadly, it's time to say goodbye to the stream. So please join me once again in thanking Dr. Gray for being here, for the chapter, for her time and patience. And also, please join me in congratulating her on the new project that dropped. That's awesome. Well done.
Thank you.
I have an applause sound effect that sometimes I play, but it's so obnoxious, and I want to hear your voice instead of this.
No, do it. No, just play it. I hope you play it. I'm going to listen for it. Just play it.
Okay. It just goes on for a while.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll hear it. Okay, so do you have anything you'd like to plug, or do you want chat to follow you on socials?
Yep, of course. If you happen to be on the space formerly known as Twitter, I'm still there. I'm on Instagram. I'm still on Facebook. I'm still on all the original things. So I won't be adding any new social media. So when these platforms sunset, I will sunset with them. I guess the elder millennial in me is like, if I have been on it previously, I'll join it again. So like Black Planet, MySpace, if those come back around, I'll join those. But I won't be joining any others. That's young folks thing. So I'll just retire. I'll retire from social media if like I get evicted. So follow me on those things. They are all distinct. So some people cross post like the same thing on all their platforms. I actually have like a different identity like on each one. So you should follow me on each one and you get like a different version of Kishonna in each one. And I think that's kind of cool. Oh, and also, am I plugging anything else? I'm gonna be dropping hopefully Black Cyber Feminism soon. I need to finish it up this summer, so that'll be the next book project. And also like an article around like Black game studies. So there's a book Lindsay Grace did, like the book Black Game Studies. There are a lot of us who do Black game studies. So I was gonna write an article about my approach and my take to like Black game studies. So hopefully I get those things done this summer. So we'll see. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Ashley.
Best wishes for writing. Thank you for being here. And I'm just going to read off my end notes. So thank you so much goes to Shawn, Pierre, and Adrianna Poindexter for the creation and use of our theme song, to Nifty Chris, the Twitch mod, for the classroom management, and to you, the listener and viewers. Without you, this production would not be possible. Listeners, viewers, chatters, if you like the stream or VOD, please make sure you're following with notifications on so you know that when we go live again and when the recordings go up. So if you're listening after the fact, you can head over to twitch.tv/professor_Ashley and follow to get the next stream live. You can also find me on almost all social media accounts as professor_Ashley. The Research Left Behind will be taking a short break to celebrate Juneteenth and also attend the Digital Games Research Association conference in Malta. We will be live again on July 10th with Dr. Rachel Cowart and her book, The Zeitgeist of Taylor Swift. Speaking of whiteness. Good night, everyone, and we will see you on July 10th. See ya!